They laughed at her, a small 8-year-old girl standing defiantly against 4 older boys. But what happened next left everyone in that schoolyard speechless. Before continuing, if stories like this inspire you, subscribe to the channel now, so you don't miss the next ones. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The cool autumn breeze rustling through the oak trees that surrounded Lincoln Elementary School in Springfield. Children's laughter filling the air during recess. But in one corner of the playground, something different was happening, something that would change lives forever. Lily Anderson, 8 years old, with bright red hair pulled back in pigtails and a constellation of freckles across her nose. She wasn't the tallest in her class, nor the loudest. While the other girls played with their fancy toys and talked about the latest cartoon shows, Lily usually sat quietly reading a book or drawing pictures of animals in her worn-out sketchbook. Her family wasn't wealthy. Her father worked 2 jobs since her mother had passed away 3 years earlier, and her clothes were often hand-me-downs from her older cousins. But there was something about Lily that you couldn't see right away, a fierce determination that burned inside her small frame. Then there was Max Reynolds, 9 years old, diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. Max didn't speak much, and when he did, his words came out differently. He had a special interest in trains, knew every model, every schedule of the trains that passed through our town. He would rock back and forth when he was excited or overwhelmed, his hands flapping at his side. The other kids didn't understand him. They saw him as weird, different, an easy target. I was the new substitute teacher at Lincoln Elementary. It was only my 2nd week at the school, and I was still learning the dynamics of the playground during recess duty. The principal had briefed me about Max, explaining that he required a little extra attention, that he sometimes struggled with social interactions. What the principal hadn't mentioned was Lily, or the unique bond that had formed between these 2 children from entirely different worlds. I noticed Max sitting alone by the fence that day, lining up colored pebbles in precise rows, his face a mask of concentration. He was in his own world, peaceful and content. Then I saw them approaching, 4 5th-grade boys led by Tyler Williams, the principal's son. Tyler was tall for his age, with expensive sneakers and the latest smartphone that his father had bought him. Despite the school's strict policy against bringing phones to class, the other boys followed him like shadows, laughing at his jokes, mimicking his swagger. "Hey, weirdo," Tyler called out, kicking at the pebbles Max had so carefully arranged. "What are you doing? Making your rock friends because you don't have any real ones." Max didn't look up. He just started rearranging the pebbles that had been scattered, his breathing becoming faster, more irregular. I was about to intervene when a small figure darted across the playground, placing herself between Max and the older boys. It was Lily, her green eyes blazing with a fury that seemed too large for her tiny body. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice steady despite being outnumbered and outsized. The boys laughed. Tyler stepped forward, towering over her. "What are you going to do about it, little orphan girl? Go cry to your mommy? Oh wait, you don't have one." I saw the pain flash across Lily's face at the cruel words, but she didn't move. She stood her ground, fists clenched at her sides. The playground had gone quiet, other children forming a circle around them, watching with wide eyes. I started making my way through the crowd, but I wasn't fast enough for what happened next. "You think you're so cool because your dad is the principal," Lily said, her voice rising. "But you're just a bully, and bullies are just cowards who are afraid of people who are different." Tyler's face turned red with anger. He pushed Lily hard, sending her tumbling backward onto the ground. There was a collective gasp from the onlookers. Max looked up, his routine disturbed, his safe space violated. He began to rock more intensely, making distressed sounds. I was only a few steps away when Lily picked herself up, dusted off her jeans, and did something that no one expected. Instead of running away or crying, she walked right back up to Tyler and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Max knows more about trains than you'll ever know about anything. He remembers every birthday of everyone in our class. He notices when I get a new pencil, or when I change the color of my hair ties. Just because he's different doesn't mean he's less. It means you're too stupid to see how amazing he is. Tyler raised his hand to push her again, but this time, I was there. I grabbed his arm, perhaps a bit too firmly, and the look of shock on his face when he realized he had been caught by a teacher was something I'll never forget. "That's enough," I said, trying to keep my voice level despite the anger bubbling inside me. "All of you, principal's office, now." As the boys skulked away, I knelt beside Lily, who had turned her attention to Max. She was helping him rearrange his pebbles, speaking to him softly, reassuringly. "Are you okay?" I asked them both. Max didn't answer, focused entirely on restoring order to his pebble rows. But Lily looked up at me with those fierce green eyes and said, "We're fine." Max doesn't like when people mess up his patterns. It makes him scared. But I told him it's okay to be scared sometimes. I helped them finish arranging the pebbles, amazed at how Lily seemed to understand exactly what Max needed: space, quiet, and patience. Not pity or forced interaction, just acceptance. Later that day, I sat in Principal Williams' office as he listened to my account of what had happened. I watched his face carefully, wondering if he would defend his son or dismiss the incident. To my surprise, he looked genuinely troubled. "Tyler has been having a hard time since his mother and I separated," he explained, rubbing his temple. "But that's no excuse for bullying. I've been too lenient with him. I see that now." What happened next set in motion a series of events that would transform not just our school, but our entire community. Principal Williams didn't just punish the boys with detention or a stern talking to. He saw this as an opportunity for education, for growth. The next morning, the entire school was called into an assembly. Principal Williams stood on the stage, his son Tyler beside him, looking uncomfortable and slightly defiant. "Yesterday, an incident occurred that I'm not proud of," the principal began, his voice echoing through the silent auditorium. "My son and several other students bullied a classmate because he's different. This is not acceptable behavior at Lincoln Elementary or anywhere." He then invited a special guest onto the stage, Dr. Sarah Reynolds, Max's mother and a renowned child psychologist specializing in autism. She spoke to the children about neurodiversity, about how brains can work differently, but still be equally valuable. She explained autism in terms the children could understand, that for Max, certain sounds might feel like thunder, certain lights might be as blinding as staring at the sun, and that his rocking and hand flapping were ways his body helped him manage overwhelming sensations. "Imagine if everyone teased you for blinking when bright light hits your eyes," she said. "That's what it feels like when people make fun of stimming behaviors." As Dr. Reynolds spoke, I watched the faces of the children. Some looked confused, others interested, but most importantly, they were listening. I glanced over at Lily, who sat beside Max in the front row. She was holding his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze whenever the crowd's reactions became too loud. Then Principal Williams did something truly remarkable. He invited Lily onto the stage. "This young lady showed more courage and compassion yesterday than many adults do in their entire lives," he said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Lily, would you like to say something?" Lily looked terrified for a moment, her eyes scanning the hundreds of faces looking back at her. But then she stepped up to the microphone, standing on her tiptoes to reach it. "Max is my friend," she said simply. "He helps me with math because I'm not very good at it. I help him when things get too loud or when people are mean. That's what friends do. They help each other with the hard stuff." The auditorium was completely silent. Then, from the back, someone started clapping. Soon, the entire room erupted in applause. I saw Max cover his ears at the noise, and immediately, Lily stepped down from the stage and returned to his side, offering him the noise-canceling headphones that hung around her neck. A gift from Dr. Reynolds. I would later learn. That assembly could have been the end of the story, a nice moral lesson that would be forgotten by lunchtime. But it wasn't. It was just the beginning. Principal Williams announced the creation of a new program at Lincoln Elementary, the Friendship Bench. It was a simple concept, a colorfully painted bench placed in the playground where children could sit if they felt lonely or needed a friend. Other students were encouraged to join them, to invite them to play, to to practice empathy actively rather than just hearing about it in an assembly. Lily and Max were asked to paint the bench together, along with Tyler and the other boys involved in the bullying incident. It was part of their restorative justice process, not just punishment, but making amends, creating something positive from a negative situation. I watched them that weekend, these children who had been adversaries just days before, working side by side with paintbrushes and smiles. Tyler was different, quieter, more thoughtful. At one point, he asked Max about the train design he was painting on one side of the bench, and Max's face lit up as he explained the specific model and engine type. Tyler listened, actually listened, and then asked another question. It was a small moment, but in that moment, I saw the power of understanding beginning to take root. Reynolds was there too, not just as Max's mother, but as a resource, answering questions the children had about autism, guiding them when Max became overwhelmed by the smell of the paint and needed to take a break. She brought special brushes with thicker handles that were easier for Max to grip, showing through actions rather than just words how simple accommodations could make a world of difference. The friendship bench was unveiled on Monday morning, and by lunchtime, it was already fulfilling its purpose. I watched from the teacher's area as a new student, a shy girl who had transferred the previous week, tentatively sat down. Within minutes, Lily had approached her, introduced herself, and by the end of recess, the new girl was laughing as she pushed Max on the swings, Lily running alongside them. Word about Lincoln Elementary's friendship bench spread quickly in our small town. The local newspaper ran a story about it, featuring a photo of Lily and Max sitting together, their backs to the camera, the colorful bench beneath them symbolizing a new era of understanding at our school. But it didn't stop there. Parents read the article and began conversations at home about empathy, about standing up for others, about the courage it takes to be kind in a world that often rewards conformity and silence in the face of wrongdoing. Other schools in the district took notice. By the end of the month, 3 more elementary schools had installed their own friendship benches, each with its unique design, but the same powerful purpose. If this story has moved you so far, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because there are other real and emotional stories that you can't miss. Dr. Reynolds was invited to give talks at PTA meetings across the district about autism awareness and how parents could foster acceptance among their children. These weren't just feel-good sessions. They were practical, informative discussions that gave adults the tools they needed to continue the conversations at home. And Lily? She blossomed in ways no one could have predicted. The quiet girl who used to hide behind books found her voice. She started a lunchtime club called Different Not Less, where students could learn about various conditions and disabilities. One week they learned basic sign language phrases. Another week they wore glasses smeared with petroleum jelly to understand what it might be like to have a visual impairment. But it wasn't just the children who were changing. The adults were learning too. Teachers attended workshops on inclusive education. Parents volunteered to read books about diversity during story time. The school librarian created a special section of books featuring characters with various abilities and backgrounds. Tyler's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable. The boy who had once led the bullying now stood firmly against it. When a group of kids from the neighboring middle school came to pick on some 4th graders, it was Tyler who stepped in, who used words instead of fists to defuse the situation. His father watched from the window of his office, a mixture of pride and humility on his face. One day, about 2 months after the incident, I found Lily alone on the playground, sitting under a tree with her sketchbook. I sat down beside her, curious about what she was drawing. It was a portrait of Max, surprisingly detailed for an 8-year-old artist, capturing not just his features, but somehow the essence of him, the slight tilt of his head as he concentrated, the way his eyes lit up when talking about his special interests. "That's beautiful, Lily," I said. "You've really captured him." She looked up at me, those wise green eyes studying my face. "Max sees things differently," she said, "so I try to draw what he might see. Everything is more colorful and detailed in his world," his mom says. "That must be nice sometimes." I was struck by the depth of her observation. The empathy that allowed her to not just accept Max's differences, but to see the beauty in them. "Why did you stand up for him that day?" I asked, the question that had been on my mind since I witnessed her courage. "You could have gotten hurt. Those boys were a lot bigger than you." Lily shrugged, adding some final touches to her drawing. "My dad says that Mom always stood up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. He says I'm just like her." She paused, her pencil hovering over the paper. "And anyway, Max would do the same for me. He just shows it differently." As if summoned by our conversation, Max appeared at the edge of the playground, rocking slightly on his heels, his eyes fixed on the ground. He didn't call out to Lily or wave, but she immediately noticed him. "Max needs me," she said simply, closing her sketchbook and standing up. "He doesn't like the new lunch menu today. Too many foods touching each other." I saved him half of my sandwich. I watched her walk across the playground to her friend, marveling at the connection between them. It wasn't a typical friendship with shared games and constant chatter. It was something deeper, a mutual recognition of each other's needs and strengths, an alliance against a world that wasn't always kind to those who didn't fit the mold. As the weeks passed, our little school continued to transform. The friendship bench became the heart of the playground, a symbol of the change that had taken root in our community. But it wasn't just about the bench. It was about the ripple effects that spread from that one brave moment when a small girl stood up against injustice. The local news station got wind of our story. They came to do a feature on the Friendship Bench initiative, bringing cameras and microphones that initially overwhelmed Max. But Lily was there, as always, whispering reassurances and holding his hand when the noise became too much. They interviewed her, this tiny advocate with fierce determination in her eyes. When asked why standing up to bullies was important, her answer brought tears to the cameraman's eyes. "Because everyone deserves to feel safe," she said. "And sometimes you have to be brave for people who can't be brave in that moment." My dad says it's like passing a baton in a relay race. Sometimes you carry the courage, and sometimes someone carries it for you. The segment aired the following week, and suddenly our small town initiative wasn't so small anymore. Emails and calls flooded in from schools across the state, then neighboring states, all wanting to know more about implementing similar programs. Principal Williams, to his credit, always made sure to emphasize that it wasn't his idea. It was born from the courage of an 8-year-old girl and the resilience of a 9-year-old boy who experienced the world differently. Dr. Reynolds started a blog documenting the journey, sharing resources and advice for other communities wanting to foster inclusivity. She always included Max's input, transcribing his thoughts about what helped him feel accepted and understood at school. His perspective, once ignored or misunderstood, became a valuable guide for educators everywhere. One afternoon, I found Tyler sitting with Max during lunch. They weren't talking much. Max was focused on keeping his food items separated on his tray, and Tyler was quietly eating his sandwich. But there was a comfort in their silence, an understanding that hadn't existed before. "He's teaching me about the California Zephyr train," Tyler explained when he saw me watching them. "It's actually really cool. Did you know it has a glass observation car where you can see the mountains?" I didn't know that, but Max nodded enthusiastically, adding details about the route and the engine specifications. Tyler listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he'd been paying attention to previous conversations. It struck me then that this might be the first time Tyler had ever really listened to someone else, had put his own need to be the center of attention aside to learn from someone he once thought had nothing to offer. After school that day, I saw Tyler's father watching them from a distance, a mixture of emotions playing across his face. Pride, regret, hope, all wrapped up in the way he observed his son's transformation. "I've been too caught up in my own problems," he admitted when I approached him. "The divorce, the stress of running a school. I didn't notice what Tyler was becoming. Or maybe I did and didn't know how to address it." He shook his head. "It took an 8-year-old girl to teach us both what real strength looks like." As autumn turned to winter, our school prepared for the annual holiday concert. Traditionally, it was a straightforward affair, children singing carols, a few instrumental performances, nothing particularly innovative. But this year, the music teacher proposed something different. She had been working with Max, discovering that while crowded spaces and loud, unpredictable noises disturbed him, music itself was something he connected with deeply. He had perfect pitch and could recreate melodies after hearing them just once. The music teacher suggested a special segment in the concert, highlighting different abilities and the unique ways students could contribute. Max would play the piano, a talent few knew he possessed, because he rarely played for anyone except his mother, and more recently, Lily. When I heard about this plan, I worried. Would the bright lights and audience stares be too much for Max? Would the pressure cause him to shut down? I voiced these concerns to Dr. Reynolds, but she smiled knowingly. Max has been practicing, she said. Not just the music, but being in the auditorium. The music teacher has been letting him play the piano there when it's empty, gradually introducing more elements, lights, recorded audience sounds, other people watching. He's determined to do this. Why? I asked. It seems like it would be so stressful for him. Because of Lily, she replied simply. He told me he wants to be brave like her. The night of the concert arrived, and the auditorium was packed with parents, siblings, and community members. The first part of the program went as usual, kindergarteners singing slightly off-key, the fifth-grade band playing recognizable if not entirely polished renditions of holiday classics. Then came intermission, and after that, the special segment titled Different Ways to Shine. Lily was first, reading a poem she had written about friendship that brought her father to tears in the front row. Then a boy with dyslexia performed a rap he'd created about how his brain processed words differently. A girl who had recently immigrated from Syria sang a traditional song from her homeland in Arabic, teaching the audience to clap along in a specific pattern. And then it was Max's turn. The music teacher introduced him, explaining that he would be playing a piece he had composed himself. There was a moment of silence as Max walked onto the stage, his eyes fixed on the floor, his hands fluttering slightly at his side. He sat at the piano bench and just sat there, not moving, not looking up. 10 seconds passed, 20. I could feel the audience growing restless, could almost hear the whispers beginning. Then, from the front row, Lily stood up. She didn't say anything. She just stood where Max could see her and gave him a thumbs up. That simple gesture seemed to anchor him. He nodded once, placed his hands on the keys, and began to play. The melody that filled the auditorium was unlike anything I'd expected. It wasn't a conventional piece with a clear beginning, middle, and end. It was something else entirely, sometimes chaotic, sometimes serene, with recurring motifs that seemed to represent different emotions or experiences. It was, I realized, what the world might sound like to Max, overwhelming at times, peaceful at others, always complex and layered in ways most of us never noticed. When he finished, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the applause began, tentative at first, then building to a thunderous standing ovation. Max didn't acknowledge it directly, but I saw the small smile on his face as he walked off the stage, heading straight for Lily, who threw her arms around him in a hug that he, for once, didn't pull away from. The success of the holiday concert led to more opportunities for students to share their unique perspectives and talents. A monthly Different Ways to Shine showcase became a regular event, with children volunteering to participate in increasing numbers. It wasn't just those with diagnosed conditions or visible differences. All students were encouraged to share the things that made them feel different or special. If this story has moved you this far, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because there are other real and emotional stories that you can't miss. The Friendship Bench program continued to evolve as well. What had started as a single bench on our playground now included a network of benches throughout the school, in the cafeteria, the library, even a small one in the quiet corner of the gym. Students were trained as friendship ambassadors, taking turns monitoring the benches and inviting anyone sitting alone to join in activities, or simply offering companionship. Lily, unsurprisingly, was the head of this program, creating schedules and training new ambassadors with a seriousness that belied her young age. But she always made sure Max was involved too, having him help design a symbol that was painted on each bench, a simple train track that formed a circle, representing his passion for trains and the idea that friendship could take you on a journey that always brought you back home. As winter melted into spring, I noticed something remarkable happening beyond our school walls. The friendship bench concept had spread to the local middle and high schools, and even to public spaces around town. The city council, inspired by our students' initiative, installed colorfully painted benches in the town square and the public park, each with a plaque explaining their purpose. Local artists volunteered to paint them, incorporating designs suggested by Lincoln Elementary students. One Saturday morning in April, the town held a ceremony to unveil these public friendship benches. The mayor, local business owners, and community leaders all attended. Lily and Max were invited as guests of honor, and to everyone's surprise, Max agreed to come. Despite his usual aversion to large gatherings, the mayor gave a speech about how a small act of courage had transformed their community, how a child's compassion had reminded adults of values they'd sometimes forgotten in the rush of daily life. Then she invited Lily to the microphone. Lily stood tall, her red hair catching the spring sunlight, looking much older than her 8 years as she addressed the crowd. "The friendship bench isn't just a place to sit," she said, her clear voice carrying across the town square. "It's a promise we make to each other. A promise that no one has to be alone if they don't want to be. A promise that different isn't bad. It's just different." She turned to look at Max, who stood slightly behind her, rocking gently but managing to stay present in the moment. "And it's a promise that we'll stand up for each other, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary." The crowd erupted in applause, and I saw Max cover his ears. Without missing a beat, Lily turned to the mayor and whispered something. The mayor nodded and raised her hands, and gradually, the clapping transformed into what I later learned was silent applause. Hands raised and shaken in the air, the celebration visible but not audible. It was a small accommodation, the kind that would have seemed impossible or inconvenient just months before. But now it felt natural, a community adapting to include all of its members. I looked around at the faces in the crowd, saw the easy way they shifted from traditional applause to this new form, and felt a swell of hope for the future these children were helping to create. The ceremony concluded with the official opening of the first public friendship bench. The mayor invited anyone who wanted to be part of this historic moment to come sit on the bench. What happened next brought tears to my eyes. Rather than rushing forward, people turned to look around, finding those who were standing alone or seemed hesitant, and invited them to join in first. I watched as an elderly man was guided to the bench by a teenage boy who'd noticed him leaning heavily on his cane. A woman in a hijab who had been standing at the edges of the crowd was warmly encouraged to come forward by her neighbors. A young man with Down syndrome was given the place of honor in the center of the bench. This was the true success of what had begun on our playground. Not just the physical benches or the program itself, but the shift in perspective, the new awareness that had taken root in the community. As the crowd dispersed and families began to enjoy the spring day in the park, I noticed Lily and Max sitting together under a blooming cherry tree, away from the noise and activity. Max was showing Lily something on the tablet his mother had given him, train schedules, probably, or facts about a new model he'd discovered. Lily was listening intently, asking questions, her focus entirely on her friend. I walked over to them, sitting down on the grass nearby. "That was quite a ceremony," I said. "You two should be very proud." Lily nodded, but Max kept his eyes on his tablet. "We're going to be in a documentary," Lily informed me matter-of-factly, "about kids making a difference. Max is going to talk about how to make schools better for people with autism." I raised my eyebrows, surprised. "You're going to speak in a documentary, Max?" He nodded, still not looking up. "I'm going to record it. Not with cameras on me, just my voice. And Lily's going to help me when I get stuck on words." It struck me then how far he'd come from the boy who couldn't handle disruptions to his pebble patterns. He was still autistic, still experienced the world in ways that could be overwhelming and challenging. But he had found ways to navigate those challenges, to share his valuable perspective with others. And much of that growth had come from having just one person who truly saw him, who stood up for him, who believed in his worth when others couldn't or wouldn't see it. The documentary crew arrived the following week. They spent several days at our school, filming the friendship benches in action, interviewing students, teachers, and parents about how the initiative had changed the culture of our school and community. They were particularly interested in Lily and Max's friendship, the unlikely bond between the quiet girl with second-hand clothes and the boy who experienced the world differently than his peers. I watched the crew struggle initially to connect with Max, to get him comfortable enough to share his thoughts. They made the mistake many adults did, speaking too loudly, asking too many questions at once, standing too close. But then I saw the head producer take Lily aside, ask her for advice, and actually listen to her suggestion. The next day, they set up differently. A quiet room with minimal equipment, questions provided in advance, breaks scheduled every 15 minutes, and Lily sitting just off camera where Max could see her. The result was remarkable. Max spoke for nearly an hour about his experiences, the overwhelming noise of the cafeteria, the frustration of group projects where no one would pick him for their team, the confusion he felt when people used idioms or sarcasm he couldn't interpret. But he also talked about the good thing, the teacher who let him use noise-canceling headphones during tests, the joy he found in memorizing train schedules and sharing that knowledge with others, and most of all, his friendship with Lily. "She doesn't try to make me different," he said, in one of his longest uninterrupted statements. "Other people want me to look at their eyes even though it hurts my brain, or they want me to sit still when my body needs to move, or they say, just try harder, like I'm not already trying all the time. Lily just lets me be Max, and she helps other kids understand. That's why she's my best friend." The producer had tears in her eyes when the interview ended. I overheard her telling her assistant that they needed to rethink the entire documentary, to center it more on the children's perspectives, rather than the adult-led initiatives they had originally planned to highlight. "This is the real story," she said, gesturing toward Max and Lily, who were sitting together on a friendship bench in the playground, sharing a packet of cookies. Not programs or policies, but kids who figured out what adults are still struggling with, that accepting people exactly as they are is the greatest gift you can give. The documentary crew's final day at our school happened to coincide with a visit from the state education commissioner, who had heard about our friendship bench program and wanted to see it in action. He arrived with an entourage of assistants and officials, all in formal attire that seemed out of place in our colorful elementary school hallways. Principal Williams gave them a tour, proudly showing off the various friendship benches throughout the school and introducing them to the student ambassadors. When they reached the playground, Lily was called over to explain the program from her perspective. I held my breath, knowing how intimidating this group of important-looking adults must seem to an 8-year-old. But Lily, with her characteristic blend of shyness and determination, stood before them and spoke clearly about how the program worked, how it had changed the culture of their school, how fewer kids were eating lunch alone or standing by themselves at recess. The commissioner seemed impressed, asking thoughtful questions that Lily answered with growing confidence. Then he asked if there had been any challenges or problems with implementing the program. Lily thought for a moment. "Well," she said, "sometimes the grown-ups want to take over and make lots of rules about how the benches work. But we think it's better when it's simple. Just be kind. Include everyone. Stand up for people who are being treated badly." There was an awkward chuckle from some of the officials, but the commissioner nodded seriously. "Out of the mouths of babes," he said, though I wasn't sure Lily understood the reference. "Sometimes we adults do complicate things that should be simple." "Thank you for that reminder." As they continued their tour, I saw Max watching from a distance, partially hidden behind the trunk of a large oak tree. He was rocking slightly, his hands moving in small, repetitive patterns that I now recognized as his way of regulating himself when he felt anxious or overstimulated. I walked over to him, careful to approach from where he could see me, not wanting to startle him. "Pretty exciting day, huh?" I said casually. "Lots of visitors." He nodded, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere past my shoulder. "Too many people. Too loud. You can go inside if you need a break," I offered. "I'm sure Mrs. Chun would let you read quietly in the library." He shook his head. "I'm practicing," he said. Practicing what? Being uncomfortable. Dr. Melissa says sometimes you have to feel uncomfortable to grow. Like a hermit crab that needs a new shell. He continued his rocking, but I noticed his breathing was steady and controlled. I'm being brave like Lily. It was one of those moments that catch you off guard as a teacher, when you realize just how much is happening beneath the surface with your students, how much strength and resilience they possess that isn't always visible. You are brave, Max, I said, meaning it completely. Bravery isn't about not feeling afraid. It's about feeling afraid and doing things anyway, because they matter to you. He nodded, processing this. The documentary people want me and Lily to come to New York to talk about the friendship bench on TV. His rocking intensified slightly. I don't want to go. Too far from home. Too many people. But I'm thinking about it. That's a big decision, I acknowledged. Whatever you choose will be okay. Going would be brave, but deciding it's too much right now is brave too. It's brave to know your limits. He seemed to relax a little at this, the rocking becoming less pronounced. Lily says she won't go without me, but I think she should go. She likes adventures. Maybe you can talk to Dr. Reynolds about finding a way that would work for you, I suggested. Sometimes there are compromises or accommodations that can help. Max considered this, then nodded once decisively. I'm going to make a list of what would make it okay and what would make it not okay. Dr. Melissa says that helps with hard decisions. That sounds like an excellent plan, I said, impressed once again by his thoughtfulness and self-awareness. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of excited voices as the documentary crew began setting up for one final shoot, a wide angle of the playground during recess, capturing the friendship benches in action amid the normal chaos and joy of elementary school play. Max tensed, his hands fluttering more rapidly. Too many things happening, he murmured. Do you want to go inside now? I asked. He hesitated, then shook his head. Not yet. I want to watch Lily. She's showing the commissioner how to play Foursquare. I followed his gaze and sure enough, there was Lily demonstrating the rules of the playground game to the dignified state education commissioner, who had removed his suit jacket and was awkwardly bouncing a rubber ball while a circle of delighted children cheered him on. She makes people happy, Max observed. Even grown-ups who forget how to play. That's her superpower. I smiled at his assessment. And what's your superpower, Max? He thought about this seriously for a moment. I notice things other people don't see, he finally said. Like how the art teacher bites her lip when she's worried about money. Or how the custodian limps more on rainy days but tries to hide it. Or how many bricks are in the wall of the cafeteria. That is definitely a superpower, I agreed. Noticing things others miss is a gift. Lily says it makes me a good friend, he added. Because I remember things that are important to people even if they only mention them once. Before I could respond, we were interrupted by Lily herself, running over with flushed cheeks and bright eyes. Max, she called, the commissioner wants to take a picture with us by the main friendship bench. Is that okay? I told him maybe not, but I said I'd ask you. Max's rocking intensified briefly, then steadied. How many people? He asked practically. Just him and us, and the principal. And maybe one camera person. The rest can watch from far away. He took a deep breath. Okay, but can I stand on the end? So nobody is on both sides of me? Of course, Lily said immediately. And we can do the silent clapping if people start clapping after. I already told the commissioner about that. I watched them walk toward the main friendship bench together. Max with his careful, measured steps. Lily moving protectively beside him, constantly aware of his needs without making a show of it. They moved like a team that had practiced their choreography for years, not months. It struck me that this was the true power of their story, not just what Lily had done for Max that day on the playground, but what they continued to do for each other every day since. The picture was taken, with Max standing at the end of the bench just as he'd requested, Lily beside him, the commissioner and Principal Williams on the other side. When the photographer was done, everyone remembered to use the silent applause, waving their hands in the air instead of clapping. I saw the look of relief on Marx's face, the small smile of gratitude he gave Lily. That photograph would eventually hang in the state capitol building, part of an exhibit on educational innovation. But in that moment, It was just 4 people sitting on a colorful bench, demonstrating how simple kindness can bridge any divide. The documentary premiered 2 months later at a small theater in our town. The producers had worked closely with Max and Dr. Reynolds to ensure the event would be accessible for him. They designated a quiet room adjacent to the theater where overwhelmed viewers could take breaks, provided detailed schedules so everyone knew exactly what to expect, and arranged for the theater to lower the volume slightly from their usual levels. These accommodations, which would have seemed extraordinary just a year earlier, were implemented without fuss or complaint. More remarkably, they benefited many more people than just Mac's elderly patrons who found standard movie volumes painful, parents with fussy infants who needed a quiet space to settle them, and several other children on the autism spectrum whose families might not have attempted a theater outing without these thoughtful provisions. The entire town showed up for the premiere. The line stretched around the block, and the theater had to add a second screening to accommodate everyone who wanted to attend. I stood in line with my fellow teachers, watching as Max and Lily arrived with their families. They were the guests of honor, after all. Max was wearing noise-canceling headphones around his neck, ready if needed, and a button-down shirt that I suspected was a compromise between his preference for familiar, comfortable clothes and the formality of the occasion. Lily was in a green dress that matched her eyes, her red hair pulled back with a headband. They looked both ordinary and extraordinary. Just kids, but kids who had started a movement that was changing lives. Inside the theater, the documentary director gave a brief introduction, thanking the community for their support and cooperation. "When we began this project," she said, "we thought we were making a film about a school program. What we discovered was something far more profound, a story about the power of friendship, acceptance, and one brave act that started a ripple effect of change." The lights dimmed, and for the next hour, we watched our community's transformation unfold on screen. The documentary was beautifully done, centering the voices of the children while showing the broader impact of their initiative. There were interviews with students, teachers, parents, and community members. There was footage of the friendship benches in action across town. There were emotional testimonials from kids who had once felt isolated and invisible, now speaking confidently about finding their place. But the heart of the film was Lily and Max, their unlikely friendship, their complementary strengths, the way they had changed each other and, in the process, changed their entire community. The most powerful moment came near the end. The filmmakers had interviewed them separately about what their friendship meant to them. Lily's answer was immediate and articulate. "Max is the bravest person I know," she said. "Not because he's not scared of things, he's actually scared of lots of things, but because he faces them anyway. Every day at school is harder for him than it is for most kids, but he comes anyway. And he's the most honest friend I've ever had. He always tells the truth, and he notices when I'm sad even when I try to hide it." Being his friend made me brave too. Max's answer was shorter but equally powerful. "Lily was the first person who didn't want to fix me," he said, looking not at the camera, but slightly to the side where I imagined Lily was standing off screen. "She just wanted to be my friend." That made all the difference. As the credits rolled, there wasn't a dry eye in the theater. The applause began, then quickly transformed into silent applause as people remembered. It was a visible symbol of how much had changed. An entire theater of people modifying their behavior without complaint, simply to make one boy feel included. If this story has moved you to tears, like it did for so many in our community, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because there are other real and emotional stories that you can't miss. The documentary was picked up by a major streaming service, and suddenly our small-town story had a national audience. The friendship bench concept began spreading across the country. Schools in cities and rural areas alike implemented the program, adapting it to fit their community's specific needs, but keeping the core principle intact. Everyone deserves to feel included. Max and Lily became reluctant celebrities in the months that followed. They were invited to speak at education conferences, appear on morning talk shows, even visit the White House. Max declined most of these invitations, finding them too overwhelming, though he did agree to participate in virtual events from the comfort of his home. Lily attended some in person, always emphasizing that the ideas came from both of them, always making sure Max received equal credit even in his absence. But what mattered most wasn't the national attention or the spread of the program to other communities. What mattered was what continued to happen in our school every day, long after the documentary crew had packed up their cameras and the news fans had moved on to other stories. What mattered was Tyler, the former bully, now training new students to be friendship ambassadors. His entire identity transformed by that moment of reckoning and the opportunity for redemption that followed. What mattered was Max, still autistic, still experiencing the world in his unique way, but now with friends who accepted him exactly as he was, with teachers who understood his needs, with a community that valued his perspective. What mattered was Lily, the quiet girl with hand-me-down clothes and a fierce sense of justice, now blossoming into a confident young leader who never lost her compassion or her readiness to stand up for those who couldn't, stand up for themselves. And what mattered was every child who sat alone on a friendship bench and found themselves surrounded by peers within minutes. Every parent who learned to celebrate their child's differences rather than apologize for them. Every teacher who reconsidered what normal meant in their classroom. 1 year to the day after the incident that started it all, Principal Williams held a special assembly to commemorate what had become known simply as Friendship Day in our school. The auditorium was packed with students, teachers, parents, and community members who had been touched by the program. Principal Williams invited Lily and Max onto the stage, along with Tyler and the other former bullies who were now integral to the program's success. It was a powerful visual, these children who had once been adversaries, now standing side by side as partners in something important. A year ago today, Principal Williams began. An act of courage changed our school forever. We learned that sometimes the bravest thing isn't standing up for yourself. It's standing up for someone else. He turned to the children beside him, and we learned that the most profound changes often start with the smallest actions. He invited each of them to say a few words. Tyler went first, visibly nervous but determined. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I was mean to Max because he was different. And I was mean to Lily because she stood up to me. I'm sorry for that. But I'm also grateful because it taught me how to be a better person. Now I know that being strong isn't about making others feel small. It's about lifting people up." Max had prepared his remarks in advance, practicing with Dr. Reynolds until he felt comfortable. He spoke quietly but clearly, his eyes fixed on a point at the back of the auditorium rather than on the crowd. "The friendship bench helps everyone. Not just kids like me," he said, "because everyone feels different sometimes. Everyone feels alone sometimes. And everyone needs friends who accept them exactly as they are." Lily spoke last, her voice strong and sure. "We didn't know we were starting something big," she said. "We were just trying to make our school a place where everyone feels safe and included. But now I think that might be the biggest thing of all." She paused, looking out at the faces watching her. "And you don't have to do something huge to make a difference. You just have to be brave for one moment. Stand up when you see something wrong. Sit next to someone who's alone. Learn about people who are different from you. Small things can start big changes." As I listened to these children sharing wisdom beyond their years, I thought about my own journey. I had come to Lincoln Elementary as a substitute teacher, expecting a temporary position before moving on to something more important. I had stayed because of what I witnessed that day on the playground, and all the days that followed, the transformation of not just a school, but an entire community, led by the moral courage of children. I'm still at Lincoln Elementary 5 years later, no longer a substitute but a full-time teacher. I requested to teach 3rd grade specifically so I could have Max and Lily in my classroom. During this crucial year of their development, both have continued to grow in remarkable ways. Max still has challenges related to his autism, but he's developed coping strategies and self-advocacy skills that have transformed his school experience. He still loves trains, still arranges his pencils in perfect rows on his desk, still needs breaks when the classroom gets too loud or chaotic, but he also has friends now. participates in class discussions on his own terms, and has started a weekly lunch club where he teaches interested students about train engineering and design. Lily remains his closest friend, but she's no longer his only one. She has blossomed into a natural leader, running for and winning class president, starting a school newspaper, organizing food drives for the local shelter. Her father still works 2 jobs. They still live in the same modest house. She still wears some hand-me-downs, but none of that defines her anymore. What defines her is her unwavering moral compass, her ability to see the best in others, her determination to make her corner of the world better for everyone in it. Tyler, now in middle school, returns regularly to mentor younger students. He's particularly good with troubled boys who remind him of himself, angry, insecure, trying to feel powerful by making others feel small. He talks to them openly about his past mistakes and the lessons he learned. Being mean doesn't make you strong, I've heard him tell them. It just makes you mean. The Friendship Bench program has been formally adopted by our entire school district and dozens of others across the state. Dr. Reynolds and Principal Williams have co-authored a book about the experience, with all proceeds going to a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in special education or child psychology. But perhaps the most meaningful legacy isn't the program itself, or the national attention, or even the thousands of children who found friendship on benches across the country. It's the subtle shift in perspective that has taken root in our community. The understanding that different doesn't mean less, that small acts of courage can trigger profound change, that children often have wisdom adults have forgotten. This understanding is visible in 100 small ways every day, in the way our local playground now includes sensory-friendly equipment alongside traditional structures, in the way restaurants in town offer noise-cancelling headphones and low-stimulation seating areas, in the way community events routinely incorporate accommodations that were once considered extraordinary, but are now simply part of thoughtful planning. It's visible in the way our school has changed physically, with quiet corners in every classroom, visual schedules posted prominently on walls, fidget tools available to anyone who needs them, but also in less tangible ways, in the culture of acceptance that has become our new normal. Last week, I witnessed a scene that brought all of this into focus for me. A new student had joined our school, a boy with cerebral palsy who used a wheelchair and an augmentative communication device to speak. In many schools, his first day might have been marked by stares, uncomfortable questions, or worst of all, avoidance. But at Lincoln Elementary, his arrival was different. Before he even entered the classroom, his future classmates had learned about cerebral palsy, had practiced interacting with communication devices similar to his, had rearranged the classroom furniture to ensure he could navigate easily. They greeted him not with pity or discomfort, but with genuine welcome, immediately including him in their morning routine, asking him questions and waiting patiently for him to respond through his device. At recess, I watched from the window as he approached one of the friendship benches. He didn't need to sit on it. Several students had already invited him to join their game, which they modified slightly to include him. But he went to the bench anyway, ran his hand over the painted surface, read the plaque that told the story of how it came to be there. Max happened to be nearby, and I saw him approach the new student with uncharacteristic initiative. "That bench is important," he said, his eyes focused somewhere just past the boy's shoulder in his typical way. "It means you belong here." "We all do." The new student typed something into his device, and a computerized voice responded. "Did you help make it?" Max nodded. "Me and my friend Lily, and lots of other people." "Do you want to hear about trains?" The abrupt change of subject might have seemed odd to an outsider, but it was so quintessentially Max. His special interest was his way of connecting, of offering friendship in the way he knew how. The new student's face lit up as he typed a response. "I love trains. My grandfather worked on the railroad." And just like that, a new friendship began, different from most, bridging multiple kinds of neurodiversity and physical difference, but no less real or valuable for its uniqueness. Later that day, as the students were packing up to go home, I overheard Lily talking to another girl who had asked why our school was different from her previous one. "We learned that everybody belongs," Lily explained. sliding books into her backpack. And that being different isn't something to fix, it's something to understand. But isn't it hard sometimes? The girl asked. Like, doesn't it take a lot of extra work to make sure everyone's included? Lily considered this, then nodded. Sometimes it is hard, but most important things are. My dad says that's how you know they're worth doing. As they left the classroom, I sat at my desk, reflecting on the wisdom in that simple statement. Yes, building a truly inclusive community does take work. It requires thought, effort, flexibility, and a willingness to challenge assumptions about what's normal or necessary. But as our school had discovered, the rewards far outweigh the costs. The bell rang, signaling the end of another school day. Through my classroom window, I could see parents arriving, children streaming out of the building, the familiar choreography of afternoon dismissal. And there, by the main entrance, was a sight that still moved me after all this time. The original friendship bench. Its paint refreshed yearly, but its purpose unchanged. Occupied by a constantly shifting group of children finding connection in a world that too often divides. A small girl stood up from the bench, waving excitedly as she spotted her mother. A boy who had been sitting beside her offered to carry her backpack to the car. Two other children made room for a younger student who approached hesitantly, immediately drawing him into their conversation. A teacher paused to chat with them all, kneeling down to eye level despite her professional attire. These simple interactions, once rare, were now the fabric of daily life at Lincoln Elementary. They were the living legacy of that moment 5 years ago, when a little girl with fierce green eyes stood up to a bully and changed everything. As I packed up my own belongings and prepared to head home, I found myself thinking about courage. Not the dramatic, movie hero kind, but the quiet, persistent kind that shows up in small moments of choice. The courage to stand up when it would be easier to stay silent. The courage to be different in a world that rewards conformity. The courage to believe that things can change, even when evidence suggests otherwise. I thought about how that courage had rippled outward from a single playground confrontation, touching lives far beyond what anyone could have imagined. And I thought about how often such courage goes unrecognized or uncelebrated, especially when it comes from unexpected sources, like children, or those on the margins, or people whose voices are rarely heard. The friendship bench story had been documented, celebrated, even nationally recognized. But for every such story that makes headlines or inspires documentaries, there are thousands that unfold quietly in classrooms, playgrounds, and communities everywhere. Small acts of courage that transform individual lives without ever becoming the subject of news stories or school assembly. As teachers, as parents, as community members, perhaps our most important work is noticing and nurturing that courage wherever we find it, especially in our children, who often see possibilities for change that adults have long since dismissed as impossible. The following day, as my students worked on a writing assignment, I looked up to see Lily deep in concentration, her pencil moving steadily across the page. Beside her, Max was arranging his colored pencils in a perfect spectrum, his face peaceful, his movements precise. Across the room, Tyler's younger brother, now in 3rd grade himself, was helping a classmate who was struggling with the assignment, showing the same patience and kindness his older brother had learned through such a difficult lesson. This, I thought, is what victory looks like, not dramatic or flashy, but steady and sustaining. Children who feel safe to be exactly who they are. Children who stand up for each other without being asked. Children who carry the lessons of the friendship bench not just in school, but into their homes, their community, and someday, into the wider world they will help create. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and comment below about which part moved you the most. Before you go, there's a recommended video right here, beside this one that will give you goosebumps. Watch it now. I don't know what challenges these children will face as they grow up, what new tests of courage await them, but I know they won't face them alone. And I know they carry within them the understanding that true strength isn't found in dominance or power over others, but in the courage to be kind when kindness is hard, to include when exclusion would be easier, to stand up when the easier choice would be to look away. This is the lesson of the friendship bench, the legacy of one brave moment that continues to unfold in countless ways, large and small, visible and invisible. It reminds us that change is always possible, that community can be created anywhere people choose connection over division, and that sometimes the most important revolutions begin not with grand gestures, but with a small girl standing her ground on a playground, defending a friend who needed her to be brave.